Welcome to INXS Access All Areas, episode 216, the podcast that dives deep into all things great about our favourite band, INXS, helping them get into the Rock Hall of Fame, but spreading the word and love about our favourite band with my partner B, to all our patrons, listeners around the world. Hello B, how are you? Off the bat, quick condolences there. I know you had a bit of a tough last week, so I know a lot of people in our community want to reach out and say, thoughts with you and the family with a sad passing, so wanted to express that to you.
Thank you, Haydn. That's very kind of you. Yes, it's been a little bit sad, but, it's life, isn't it? It's going to get us all in the end.
Oh,
but anyway, this is my happy bubble, and it's good to be back. It's been sad to be away from you for 2 weeks.
Well, I was all energetic, ready to go. We've got a sort of a belated birthday present to a very, very important person in our musical life. We will share a bit later, but can't wait to ask you, B, how's your INXS Fortnite been? Because we just come off the reissue Listen Like Thieves episode where we went down and dirty with all the pending tracks that are going to be released. How's your Fortnite been?
Yeah, it's been well, apart from what we've just talked about there, I have been quite busy. A friend of mine, a friend of the podcast, Lisa Mack, had a birthday, and I went to see her, and we did some INXS stuff together. Her wife had got a free ticket to go to see Bob Geldof, so I went to see Bob.
That's right. And I think I texted you, didn't I, when you told me about it? What did I say to you?
You said, why?
I think
what was my answer?
I think my text was, what are you doing that for?
And what was my answer?
Your answer was to basically get into his head about getting Tiger into our episodes. Is that right?
If I'd ever had more time and if I hadn't have had such awful things happen, I would have loved to have got something for Tiger. But to tell you the truth, the meet and greet was rather expensive and it didn't happen. The man can talk, I tell you now. And the way he was pacing, he was pacing backwards, forwards. I will say one thing that was interesting, because I've never read anything about like his books or anything, only the Paula and Michael books. But he did a poem sort of right at the very beginning, and he mentioned Paula and Michael, but not their names. My wife and my brother, he said. I found that very interesting.
Do you think the brother was referenced to Michael or someone else?
Yeah.
Why?
Because I don't know, but it was definitely, he called Michael his brother.
Right. Okay. Look, it's funny. We probably are getting into a monologue before we normally do, but I've always respected Bob for being the dad to Tiger amidst difficult circumstances. Didn't have to do it, but took on the task.
Yeah. Well, it was Paula's wishes in her will to keep the girls together.
Yes. That's right. But look, I guess the bigger important question is, did you know more than one song?
It was really interesting, actually. Like, he'd worked in an abattoir and he'd worked in Canada in the oil rigs and all sorts of things. So very interesting. And then when he found out like girls wanted to shag him and just for playing a song, he was like, right, I'm sold. I'm going to be a rock star. So that was his...
Yes.
That's what he said.
That was his motivation.
You're a young boy and you want to get laid, be a rock star. Yeah.
Yeah. And was the gig on a Monday, was it, or?
Well, I don't think he likes Monday, so he wouldn't
that's right.
Monday, would he?
All right. Anything else in your INXS world you come across in the last couple of weeks? I know that we're really getting down to the countdown. It's just literally about a month as we record today for our party. And I'm excited about the goodie bag. I saw a few little things in the goodie bag. I won't share what they are. But we do have a raffle coming up, I think, for the Listen Like Thieves release. Do you want to just share a little bit of info on that?
Yeah, well, I thought, let's open this up to everybody, the Listen Like Thieves. But thanks to Kirk and Tim, they signed a original Listen Like Thieves album, The Gatefold, the beautiful one. That's up for grabs. You only have to go to our website and you can purchase as many tickets as you like. They're $20 each.
Yep.
Not too many have been sold so far, so you could be in the running to get that. It'd be pretty good.
All right. Well, I think that'll be a very popular raffle as we get closer to the date. But get in. And what are the prices of the tickets on those?
$20.
Right. Any limit on how many you can get?
Nope.
No. Doing the Listen Like Thieves episode, aroused a lot of discussion. A couple of people a little bit peeved that you don't get the CD with the album. And
oh, you saw that? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are various incarnations and packages, and we know sometimes that Look, when I looked at all the stuff coming out, I don't think it's a cash grab and things like that. I think there's some stuff for the lower end purchaser and what disposable money you've got, and then there's the real fan sort of have everything you want pack. Look, I guess it is sort of marketing. There are some sort of things where you got to buy one to get the other. I think what I said to you before we came on air today, B, it looks like overall there's quite a lot has gone into this particular reissue. The amount of articles in the press at the moment, the amount of space that this reissue is getting. I feel like management are stepping up to the plate on it. And you could argue, with other reissues like Full Moon last year and some others, it was quite passive in their, marketing aggression.
Yeah. And I really like the actual one you can get on iTunes, and they've been releasing little songs as well. Have you done that?
Yeah, well, I think pretty new. So I think they've done a Kiss the Dirt, haven't they? A demo version, and then Biting Bullets was the other week.
Exactly. And there is another one coming out soon. It's going to come, another demo, little nibble it for us. Another Easter egg. It's Easter soon, isn't it?
That's right, absolutely. All right, well, I guess it's probably time to welcome our patrons aboard to our episode. Over to you, B, to welcome aboard.
I'd like to say hello to everybody outside on the highway. Let's all say hello to everybody outside. It's about 10,000 people at least. Hello.
Well, hello to our honorary members, Tim Farriss, Nick Egan, Mark Opitz, Richard Simkin, Cameron Adams, Mary Woods, Darren Jones and Paul Jolie. Our patrons, Carmen, Carrie-Anne, Danielle, Sarah Markram, Sarah Camia, Dr. Jim, Katie, Lisa Mack, Anne-Marie, Susan P, Pedro, Mandy, Amanda H, David, Paul Jolie, Amanda V, Ella, Ryder, Tony, Erica, Abigail, Stefan, Jim, John A. Vink, Jackie, Sheila, Helen, Brett, Suzanne, Glenn Davis, Laurel, Bard, Laurie, Manny, Jill, Heidi, Paula, Lisa, Michael, Juliet, Scott, Anthea, Tracy, Diana, Andrew, Georgie, Stephen, Mark, Vernon, Vern, Mandy Jane, Nick, Sula, Amy, Paul P, Paul B, Kathy, Jay, Amberette, John Jamin, Chantel, Neil, Mary Ellen, Giuliano, Darren, Amber, Mark, Rob, Minnie, John Bridges, and not forgetting Joe Robbins and Sue D. Welcome to the podcast.
All right, B, well, our little topic in today, we're going to talk a little bit about the joy and the celebration of Andrew Charles Farriss, who just recently turned 66. And I reckon he's getting his kicks when he goes to Route 66 up in America. But we're going to be doing a deep dive into the man, the mystique, the man that's Andrew Farriss, that we had the joy in the last 6 months of meeting and seeing in concert with his own sort of country stuff. And we're going to dive deep into all things about Andrew today. So looking forward to sharing that with you, B.
Fantastic. Can't wait.
All right. Well, what's the time for now?
It's time for the news.
Hi, this is Darren Joseph from Perth, Western Australia, and you're listening to the #1 INXS podcast, Access All Areas. And now, it's time for the news.
All right. Well, jam-packed news section, B. If often we have a couple of week break, we generally build up all of the bits of things going on at the moment. I did want to give a bit of shout out to somebody who I believe is going to be doing the attendance at our 5th birthday is Richard Simkins, who I believe found a treasure trove of memorabilia in the last week, and I think we put it up on our Insta page. Is that right?
Yeah. I think it's because I said, Richard, have you got anything for the raffles for when we're there? And he goes, I think I might. And then he's coming up with all this stuff like, oh, what's he going to say for us?
I think like Chris Murphy, when we, particularly towards, the end of his life, he'd often go open up some chest of drawers somewhere, and then there's that infamous or famous, I think, storage unit in North Sydney there, where there's a whole lot of INXS stuff there, and I think Kirk's sort of been in and out of there a couple of times. But
I liked the one where he's got all those rare guitar picks of Gary's, the blue ones. I'm like, oh my God, he got like about 20 on them in one frame.
That's right. So looking forward to seeing some of that stuff at our party. Also, too, happy anniversary birthday to Elegantly Wasted, that I guess at the time of recording, B, turns 28. Wow. And also The Swing turns 41. So INXS tend to release a couple of albums in April and a lot of them in sort of October in their history. But happy birthday to those two albums. Also, too, big shout out to the first time hearing promos on YouTube for Devil Inside, Never Tear Us Apart, Need You Tonight, Original Sin, and Listen Like Thieves. There's a lot of cool first reaction videos out there. Again, do yourself a favour. I think there's one there, B, where someone's listening to Need You Tonight blindfolded.
Really?
which takes away the joy, half of it. Hello, ladies. There's a lot of these little reaction videos that just taken the world by storm, B.
Tiz, did you read our last newsletter that Danielle referenced it? Do yourself a favour and listen to some of these things.
Yes.
So, yeah,
Yes.
so well done, Danielle. That's absolutely
That's right.
brilliant.
Now, the Singers Room, which is, comes through one of the publications. I think there's a gentleman called Ed Tomlin this time has done his top 10 INXS songs in the Singers Room publication. So they always seem to rotate these around with different guest presenters. Also, B, great friend of the podcast, Dua Lipa. I don't know. Did you go see her in concert? You probably wouldn't go see someone like her, would you?
I would have liked to have gone, but
Yeah.
didn't get
Well, she's just finished Australian and New Zealand tour where she was playing a cover song in each city, as sometimes these international guests do. So I do believe she played songs with Tame Impala. She, I think, just did Don't Dream It's Over in Auckland with Tim.
that was great. Did you watch that?
She did, I think, Kylie Minogue. She did Torn, I think, for Natalie Imbruglia. But she did Never Tear Us Apart in Sydney, which was quite opportune and quite interestingly, B. She also did, as they call a sort of a sample of Need You Tonight on one of her songs called Break My Heart, and we're going to talk about that a bit later. Okay. And we may hear a bit more of her cover version at the end of the show today. So kudos to Dua, who's a big INXS fan. Also, big shout out to Lee Harding. I've mentioned him a few times on the podcast. He, on Anzac Day, is going to be playing in Mornington in Melbourne, down on the peninsula. I'm going to try get along to that, B, and try get him on our show because he does an INXS sort of tribute show and has mixed it up over the last few years. And he's a former winner of Australian Idol and did support INXS in 2005 up in Queensland, or 2006 maybe, when JD was first touring Australia as the winner of Australian Idol. But I think he got his dose of INXS then, and since has become a dedicated sort of interpreter of their songs and does great acoustic shows and things. So,
well, if you want to go, let me know, because I know the bass player that's in that band.
Okay.
Lee.
Well,
Yeah.
he's also playing in Albury Wodonga in July, but I'm going to try and get to the Anzac Day gig. It's on a Friday night. Also, too, as we said earlier, listen like these, there's tons of articles out there. You know, there's a good publication called Digital Noise with a good article on this particular issue. And just do yourself a favour. There's plenty out there. And as I said, you know, the management and all involved seem to be doing quite a lot of publicity around this pending May 9th release, B. It's exciting.
Yes.
So have you got your advance copy yet? Or have you ordered it yet? Or are you just waiting to go?
I'm hoping that someone will just send it to me. Yeah.
Wow. Imagine if Tim turned up to our party and just, here you go, guys, here's one.
You just never know, do you?
Just never know.
But the only thing is there's only about 4 tickets left to the party, so
Right,
a lot
okay.
of people could...
All right. Now, Lionsgate Cinema, sort of the big movie group, they just did a big CinemaCon. I'll try to pronounce it. Sounds like Comic Con, but they just did a big CinemaCon movie festival on the weekend. And Dave Franco, brother of James, has a movie called Together, and he and his wife Alison Brie were up on stage promoting this movie about to be released, which is sort of a romance psychodrama or whatever it is. But it came out to the sounds and tunes of Never Tear Us Apart.
Oh.
So I don't know if that's in the movie or that was just a promotional thing for this stage interview, but that was just there on the weekend. Also, too, B, I don't know if you saw this as well. A couple of weeks ago, there was a boat formerly owned by Michael. Did you hear this or see this?
No.
The boat was called the Queen Royal, and it just had some restorations done. It's got a big chrome gold wrap, all sort of wrapped around it. It's in Docklands in Melbourne, and it was the former owner of Michael Hutchins. So I don't know if it's being
Michael owned a boat?
Yeah. So
no way. Tim, maybe.
It was in the Herald Sun, and it's up on Insta and a whole different thing. So we
might have to do a bit of deep diving.
Might have to ask the band about this.
Yeah.
He kept that pretty quiet.
He did.
Unless Colin Diamond, you used a bit of the funding there. So, yeah, so that there was a big sort of article on that. So I thought it was...
And it was called the Queen Royal.
Yeah. And
doesn't even sound like a boat that Michael would name.
They've done this restoration, this big gold chrome going around. It looks really sort of glam. So there you go.
Okay, all right.
And also a reminder, if anyone in sort of the sort of southern sort of Canada area, the north of America in Michigan, JD is going to be playing on the 21st of June at the Island Resort Casino. So I still think they've got some tickets there. Anyone in the vicinity, do yourself a favour and, put a microphone up to JD, see if you can get him on the podcast because he's hard man to nail.
But he keeps liking our stuff.
He does.
He does.
But B? All right, B, well, we've just come back to the sounds of Stay Young there, which we thought was an appropriate song for Andrew there as he celebrates his 66th birthday. Wow.
So young.
I know. And looking young, looking fit.
He does. It looks great.
Touring life agrees with him. And you know what? If you were Andrew's, family, you could sense that Andrew would give you a great cuddle, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
Is that
big
fair to
bear.
say?
Or a little bear.
Yeah. All right.
Did you see he got a really lovely present for his birthday? A grandchild.
Correct. That's correct.
Little Alfie.
Big congratulations there.
Yeah, big
And,
congratulations.
he probably sounds like he's a little bit in holiday mode at the moment, doesn't he? He's probably had a busy last few months and probably chilling after a lot of whirlwind tours around the world and things.
Getting snuggles now with the baby.
Yeah. But what I wanted to do today a little bit was, in our very early incarnations, I think you remember this, B, we did an episode on each band member in our probably first 10 weeks of the podcast. You can go back and listen to them. We probably did one on Andrew and, the first 5 or 6 episodes. But look, some 5 years later and with perspective and time and knowledge and just comfortability talking like we do, I wanted to celebrate Andrew's birthday a little bit by having a special episode with him just to probably highlight for, maybe some of our passive listeners and reinforce to some of our more passionate listeners just, the genius that I think, Andrew, is. And we know sort of in the mini-series that was quite a funny tagline there where Andrew turns up in Hong Kong and still you and he goes, I'm the musical genius, because often, when you look at band members and things like that, and I think great bands, they always have somebody who's the heart of the band in terms of that musical sort of genius. And I thought just for the sake of the exercise, B, I'd just sort of share some of these, famous bands in the last 50 years, particularly in rock music, that has, amidst some of the other star performers within it, people within the band who actually are the genius of the band. And when I say genius, that is they write the stuff. They come up with the hooks. They write the melodies. They do, the riffs. They look at the arrangements. They've got a very, A to Z understanding of how a song should be constructed. And they are by, for all intents and purposes, geniuses in their craft. And, one of the ones that came to my mind when I first, put this list together was Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys.
Yeah.
If you look at a song like Good Vibrations, which was such a departure for them and just the sonics and the production values behind it, it was such an advanced, musical production that 50, 60 years later, it's iconic and it's always, up there in the polls for one of the more iconic tracks. But, Brian was really the heartbeat of the Beach Boys. And, truth be known, the last 40 years since probably Kokomo and things like that, they really have just been this Beach Boy sort of touring act that, a bit cheesy in a way. But back in the 60s with Pet Sounds and the 70s, particularly when Brian was, well and wasn't suffering from afflictions and things, he really was the musical epicenter of their craft and was the guy that really, without him being there, they would have not been anything. All right. U2, I put it down to the Edge. Bono might be the front man, but the Edge is the musical genius there with his guitar and riffs and, just his ability to create melodies and tunes and sounds through the guitar. Without the Edge, U2 would be a very, very poor sort of imitation from what it actually is. Great friend of the band INXS, Oasis B. Noel Gallagher. Look, Liam's the front man, probably the charisma sort of guy, whatever, but, Noel's the guy that writes them all. He's the musical guy. He's the sort of the song craftsman and things. And they've lost, and found more band members than most people in the last few years. And even with their tour getting back together, they've only, I think, got one other original member coming back. So it really is Noel's band. And Liam was there as probably the eye candy and the vocal candy for them. The Rolling Stones, Keith Richards, is probably the musical engine for them. He's the riff meister. He's the sort of the sonic guy. He's the one that really probably is behind the tunes, etc., that Mick put the lyrics to. The Police, Sting, despite Andy Summers and Stewart both being unbelievable sort of guitarists and drummers. Sting was recruited by Stuart Copeland. Stewart happened to be going up to Newcastle and dropped into some bar and saw this band and some jazz band play, and it was Sting. And Stewart's American. He says, I've got to have this guy in my band, and recruited him. And really, most of the major songs the Police ever wrote were all written by Sting, albeit, Andy was an unbelievable guitarist and Stewart was an unbelievable drummer. The music really was driven by Sting. AC/DC, despite, the popularity of Angus and Bon Scott and Brian Johnson, Malcolm Young was probably the real guitar hero / musical force in the band. Angus might have had the riffs, but Malcolm was the real engine room. And I think Mark Opitz had said that to us on many podcasts. Yes. Pink Floyd, you've got Roger Waters, who, a lot of people love Dave Gilmour and his guitar and his vocals, so probably he's a better guitarist and vocalist than Roger. But Roger's the guy who came up with all the lyrics and the melodies and the songs and in many cases the vision and the grandeur of Dark Side of the Moon, the grandeur of the Wall. They were these concepts that were conceived by Roger, and he knows he came up with those concepts and tells the world he is, but he was that sort of innovator behind that image of the band. Moving along, we've got Led Zeppelin with Jimmy Page. Again, they recruited, the lead singer, to the band, so Jimmy was sort of the engine room behind, again, the music there. And Robert Plant, came into the band after Jimmy. Queen, Freddie was the front man. And look, Freddie probably, you could argue, might be a dually important person in the band. But, Brian May was probably the guy there that, as I said, was the musical sort of genius behind the riffs and everything there. Fleetwood Mac, Lindsey Buckingham. Without him, a lot of stuff wouldn't have occurred. He was the main guy there. Van Halen, Eddie Van Halen was the mainstay there. So even though they lost David Lee Roth and brought in, other singers like Sammy Hagar, Eddie Van Halen kept the band alive with the riffs and things like that. So he was the mainstay. Jim Morrison in the Doors, again, was probably the pivotal guy who was the vision, the lyricist, the melody guy, and the most sort of driving force. Rage Against the Machine, you got Tom Morello, who's touring Australia very, very soon, created Audio Slave. Zach LaRoche, who I think was the lead singer, was obviously powerful, but it was really Tom's band, and he was the musical sort of director there. And the last one I got here is Talking Heads, who were a big influence on INXS with David Byrne, who was the main singer behind them, and he's gone on to fantastic things as a solo artist. So I guess there's a bit of a backdrop, B. INXS were a sum of 6 parts, and we've all highlighted over the journey the importance of each member. And, obviously Michael probably was the most famous member, but I think, Andrew, part of today is just recognising that he really was that epicenter of musical genius that, like these other bands, without, they just wouldn't have had the material to do what they did.
Mm-hmm.
What you do with the material, what Michael did as that frontman was huge.
Yeah.
But you get the seeds of that melody and that music. Without Michael playing an instrument, you could see how pivotal that Michael leaned on Andrew for those particular, tunes.
Yeah. Well, Andrew was the spark and Michael was the fire.
There you go. Now, when you think of Andrew a little bit, what comes to mind for you? I've sort of opened up the discussion today. What sort of comes out of your mind when you see Andrew and look back in time?
Quiet.
Mm.
Always in the background.
Yep.
And I find that he is not just the guy on the keyboards. He's the guy on the guitar, the keyboards. He's singing in the background. He's on the harmonica, probably even better on the drums. Actually, we did see him on drum opera, didn't we? He was playing drums as well.
On the live version when they played this?
Yeah.
Yes. I think helping John out, they were, weren't they? They were doing
So we talk about Kirk being a multi-instrumentalist, but Andrew was too. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I put down here, look, Andrew's skills, he's a keyboard player, but, he's a piano player. He's a kid's piano player too, beautiful girl. Guitar, that's something I always remember that Mark Opus said to us, all those great riffs that Tim and Kirk played, Andrew came up with those.
Came up with them, yeah.
And maybe Tim and Kirk might be better players because they literally, that's
their thing.
That's their major craft. But coming up with the actual sounds and the riffs, Andrew on the guitar is brilliant at creating
the ideas, the spark.
Yeah. He plays the harmonica or the harp, which particularly on the XL.
Harp?
Well, the harp's another name for a harmonica.
Oh, right.
They call it a harp as well. not the Cleopatra harp. No, harp. No, a harmonica, often they refer to as a harp. So,
okay, I've never heard that, Haydn. Okay. Just
well,
see him just bringing one.
Stick with me, I'll make you a nerd. Okay. But
you know what's in my mind as well, because Andrew mentioned about that they stole the church piano once, do you remember? Because they hadn't got one, and then they ended up getting it back before the Sunday service or something.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Yeah, so look, the harmonica or harp, you see it on songs like Suicide Blonde and Who Pays the Price and On My Way, particularly, for the XL meet, that was a big bluesy type thing he was playing.
Yeah.
He's a lyricist, he's a vocalist, particularly backup vocals and a lot of the B-sides with INXS, plus nowadays all of his own material. But he's also been a producer, for Welcome, he was really a co-producer on that. He, produced Jenny Morris, he's probably produced a lot of his own material. And as the band sort of emerged and went forward, particularly him and Michael around Full Moon and Elegantly Wasted and things like that, they were very hands-on involved, with the production of what they wanted and, those particular sort of recordings.
And he likes a lot of real sounds, lots of real instruments compared to samples. I know he does use a lot of samples, but mainly he will sample old, like the Pinky Plonk keyboards for the kids.
Yeah, and even like the banjo, there's a banjo, the New Sensation that's it's really sort of dialed down a bit, but it's part of the track listing on that New Sensation.
And that also reminds me of another interview we had with Bruce, who was Ollie Olsen's manager. Andrew went round because he had a massive record collection. Do you remember?
Yes,
and he not stole, but he says, "Can I have all this?" And just took it away and absorbed. He's a big sponge, is Andrew, I suppose.
Well, yeah, and look, if you think back to any artist, you look at the era they were sort of growing up in, and to develop a career in as a musician, you then have to have influences. And we all know the story about Mr. Farriss took the boys to England on the boat in the 60s, and they met the Beatles, and I guess a lot of that stuff was quite informing, and they played instruments at a young age. And I think some of the artists and bands that the band INXS sort of covered in their early days and were influenced by in their sound were like Roxy Music and Steely Dan and the Kinks and Talking Heads and Iggy Pop and XTC and Chick and some of that funk music and things were very, very formative. And as you said, I think Andrew was a sponge, and I guess as it is your craft and you want to develop your craft. And we saw Andrew, particularly as the band evolved, really discovered Indian music. In terms of stuff on Welcome, like a song like Questions, had like sitars and things like that. And then I think back to some of the early stuff, like there's a song called Prehistoria, which is a bit similar to Three Sisters from Tim, that's got that sort of indigenous type sounds out in sort of the Australian outback. And they were very sponge-like in terms of their absorbing of influences. And as we've said, INXS, we're a sound based on the sum of all their influences there, but to come up with the melodies and the riffs and the songs and the sounds, a lot of this really had to filter through Andrew at a young age and develop and evolve over time. So when it got to recording an album, they're probably like Chris Murphy would say, well, what's this one? This is all a bit different, and you're using this here. And I think the only sound they didn't sort of listen to or take advantage of was a lot of the reggae stuff that Chris wanted them to do. Yeah. Later in their career, they're like, well, I think we want to do a reggae album.
I want to go country.
Yeah, but and look, let's look at the dance stuff, particularly as the 80s came about, and INXS were very much in the early days doing remix albums and stuff like that. That probably, was born out of the influence at the time of disco and electronica and bands like Chic and remixes and stuff like that.
Roxy Music was a big influence for them.
Yeah, and you hear it in the saxophone with Kirk, in terms of that sound and things. And then it's interesting. I was just looking at sort of Andrew's career, and we talked about Dua Lipa earlier, and you go, well, who's been influenced by INXS, and particularly then from Andrew and some of these great tunes that he came up with. And we know bands like 1975, have definitely borrowed riffs and sounds from INXS and cited in interviews. The Killers, as we know, they've performed INXS songs plenty of times on tours around the world. There's a big UK band in the early 2000s called The Bravery, that were quite big, that had sort of very INXS influenced sound. We played Josh Homme from Queens of the Stone Age the other week, who was playing with Chad Smith and things, and Billy Joe Armstrong and those guys, on a fundraiser for the fires in LA. And, they're playing Don't Change. The Matchbox 20 guys with Rob Thomas have been very, very, very influenced, with INXS. Train, even Duran Duran we spoke about with the Nile Rodgers when they first heard the original Sin Australia and go, man, we're so jealous. And suddenly they, went down the funk thing in the mid-'80s after INXS sort of paved the way. Dua Lipa, we just said the other night, covered their stuff. Palomo Faith, recorded Never Tear Us Apart, became a top 20 hit in the UK. And even, let's be frank, U2, were highly influenced towards the end of their sort of major say the end, but towards the early 2000s and the late 90s by INXS with, songs like Mysterious Ways, that Chris Thomas, always said sounded like one of the INXS tracks. And I guess Michael and Bono hanging out, there was this cross-pollination of styles where they borrowed from each other. But, how does this all come back to Andrew? Well, Andrew was often the genesis of a lot of these versatility and styles that, formulated their appeal. And it's interesting, like, I've said this before, INXS aren't what I call a genre band. And what I mean by a genre band is that The Cure are a genre band. They appeal to, if I had to sort of, bring it down to its natural definition, that gothic type fan, that's their audience there. They have a very much a sort of a genre of fan. If you go to a Chili Peppers show, they've got a certain type of genre of fan. If you go to a punk show, like back in the day, like the Clash and the Sex Pistols, they've got a certain type of fan. INXS have this wide audience. The women, love Michael and adored him, but the guys really sort of, love the band. And they don't have a cookie cutter type audience because maybe the amount of styles they have and all of Andrew's influences are showcased on a batch of these recordings. So, when we go to our party in 4 weeks' time, we got a motley crew, pardon the pun, of people coming, haven't we?
Oh, we really have. And
Diversity, you know?
yeah, I mean, we've started a Spotify list for everybody to put their favorite songs on, and there's just so many songs to play. I
Yes.
was thinking, I was daydreaming a little bit while he was talking. Like, we've spoken to Andrew a few times now, and in person, and when you speak to him, he's very thoughtful, and he doesn't answer you that quickly. And I was wondering what his thought process would be like with music. Does he really digest it and think, wow, does that really work with that? Or is it a quick? It's an interesting thing to think. Does his mind work differently with
He
music?
described himself, I think, on our podcast as being verbose. And I remember hearing that word a lot growing up and wondering what it meant. And
Yeah, tell me.
I think what it meant was he doesn't sort of succinct or articulate clearly or straight to the point his thoughts. He generally meanders a bit.
Ah,
But I think within that, when we've heard him talk about particularly solo stuff and going to country, I think the thing I love about Andrew and his musicianship is how brave he's been over time, not to be hamstrung by a style, an era, what's cool, what's not cool. He's been very much open to experimentation.
yeah.
And not being confined and not saying, well, this is country, you can't do this, or this is rock, you can only stay here. He's always been very open to different styles and things. And I think that, as we said before, is part of INXS's appeal, that they can do rock, they can do soul, they can do pop, they can do, heavy guitar rock, they can do synth, they can do the ballad type stuff. They've got plenty of bullets in their kit.
What's really good with the country for Andrew is its storytelling, isn't it?
Yes.
So he's able to link it to his own personal life. We'll probably hear some nice baby ones coming out soon, I should imagine.
They say the best storytellers or songwriters are country singers because they do tell you a story. If you think back to some of the great songs like "My Name Is Sue" and
Is it?
Well, a song called, that from Johnny Cash, and you look at some of the great country songs, they really are storytelling from a place of experience. And, we know with his album coming out, which I think is going to be called The Prospector or something like that, some really interesting sort of detailed stories behind them, and it probably reflects, I think, Bob Dylan. He was a fan of Bob Dylan, who's been a great storyteller over the journey.
He's quite spiritual, is Andrew, as well, especially since he's been married to Marley. He's a little bit more grounded. Yeah, he's a loving man.
So let's get into Andrew the Man. So I put down here, I've had to describe him, I put down quiet, introverted, uncertain, and I say uncertain in the mini-series where, given it was a sort of a band-produced sort of, series, and part of the narrative Andrew in the series was, accounting versus, music. And do I hit the books and become an accountant, or do I become a musician? And maybe the belief factor of taking to the next level. And this is where, we give Tim Farriss a lot of credit, because even though he may not be the musical sort of juggernaut of the band, he was the probably inspiring leader and manager in the early days, and saying we can take this to the nth level, and probably being the big brother influenced and inspired Andrew to keep going. But, I think over the journey, you could sort of see Andrew from the early interviews in his younger years to now just really come out of his shell and be much more certain about himself. And, with the social media stuff there, what was once an introverted nature, he's embraced the modern media paradigm, and he's out there and showing us shopping in downtown sort of Tennessee and all sorts of things, which is a lot of fun. A couple of things I would describe Andrew as, I'd say he's prolific. Kirk sort of hung up the saxophone and the guitar. Tim's had his battles with his hand. John is living the rural regional life, probably going at his own rate. Gary, who's, fully active with Ash and Moon, and Michael's dearly departed. So probably Andrew is the one that's kept going. People like Glenn Fry and Don Henley from the Eagles, when the Eagles sort of broke up for the better part of 15 years, they kept going, kept building, and kept releasing material and had solo success. Andrew's probably kept, the songwriting craft alive by being as prolific as he has. And I'll talk about, maybe his potential vault a little bit later. I think he's a real craftsman. I think you said something really interesting earlier about he does love organic instruments, like the real sounds of a pure piano and a pure banjo guitar and different types of real pure sounds from real bona fide instruments, which, as we know, look, again, this is old man talking here, but when I hear modern day music, they sound like these productions, like they sound like algorithms. I can't hear where is the guitar, I can't hear the drum. It feels like this melting pot of all these things blended together on an algorithm computer.
Yeah.
And it lacks subtlety. And as much as Dua Lipa's doing great and all these ones, I don't hear the heart and soul. Something about beautiful instrumentation and stuff like that is that, they
You don't hear the squeak on that guitar, do you?
No, but they just feel a little bit vacuous and lifeless, a lot of these modern day production techniques.
Some of them.
Yeah, most of them. Also, too, I sort of, look at him as probably over the journey being the music director of the band, the key sort of albums post the swing, sort of once they got into this like Thieves and Kick and that onwards, Andrew was really given the keys, I guess, music-wise to write most of the material, of which Michael then provided most of the lyrics. Encouragingly, those behind the scenes and the producers who they work with, and maybe it was Chris Thomas who was the one who said, hey guys, like, you got this sort of unbelievable musician here in Andrew. It's not that we want to belie your own other, skills, but I think we've got someone who's a genuine genius here who can write you fantastic songs, credible songs, popular songs, hookish songs, artistically, ambitious songs. Give him the keys to the deposit box. And Andrew, being maybe polite and a little bit introverted, you wonder whether he would have had the swagger or the gumption to actually instigate that. And thank God that someone asked him to do it, because he may not have asked the question if not given the encouragement. Now, we know with the Kick album, the band got extra royalties, even though they didn't also necessarily have co-writes. And that was a really smart play where, probably Andrew was at the peak and the momentum building, and Michael as well. And they're like, well, let's let these guys come. But every band needs a leader. Every band needs sort of direction. It needs a captain, and it needs a theme and an angle and something to sort of say, well, why make an album in the next place if it's not going to be something musically adventurous or something they believe in? And I don't think Andrew ever doled an album in and said, let's just do it for management. Oh, here's some songs and, off you go, and I'll just sort of dial them in. I think he always was quite passionate going into the studio saying, well, if we're going to do this, let's do it proper and do it proud,
Yeah, and as we know, and as we go through all these albums, they're so packed with amazing material, and we know that there's even more that's in a vault somewhere that needs to come out, but probably will never come out, that Andrew and Michael have written.
Yeah, that's right. And look, interestingly, I thought what we could do is just highlight, the first 2 or 3 albums, there weren't many individual song contributions from Andrew alone. First 2 albums, they were all band productions, and maybe some band members were probably flattered with getting credit on some of the songwrites and things. But once they got to Shaboo Shabaa, there, on that particular album, there was one track there that was a complete Andrew, contribution. So that was both a musical and song lyric sort of solo, I guess, from Andrew contribution to the album. On the Swing album, he had Johnson's Aeroplane, which is a real fan favourite for many, which was his own contribution. So Michael didn't contribute anything there. On Listen Like Thieves, there was This Time, which it really is a sort of a, an ode to relationships lost, I think, isn't it? If you think of that lyric, last time we will fight like this, it's quite a heavy song when you hear it.
It is. I thought it was Michael, so that's all Andrew.
Yeah, that's Andrew. You've got Mediate there, which was, I guess an iconic track off Kick.
Yeah, it's great.
Complete Andrew song. A couple of tracks off X that Andrew wrote that didn't make it onto there, but were on the bonus sort of X album bonus track list, was Salvation Jane and Waiting to Be Free. On the Live Baby Live, he wrote Shining Star. That was an individual Andrew song. And then when the Welcome album came along, as we know very famously, Michael turned up and I think left his lyrics in a cab in London, didn't he? So he was a little bit short on normal material for said album. And it's probably why in the Welcome album, you've got songs like Questions, Heaven Sent, and Baby Don't Cry, and Beautiful Girl are all Andrew songs.
Yes.
So from that sort of point of view.
And Questions is actually sang on the album by Andrew.
Yeah, that's right. So they've got the 4 tracks there are Andrew songs that aren't lyrically assigned to Michael, whatever there. And probably, as I said, Michael lost the lyrics. And I don't think those songs suffer at all by just having Andrew as the sole songwriter. We move ahead to, I guess, the Switch album. You've got Hungry and God's Top 10 were both Andrew tracks. I know God's Top 10 was a particularly proud song for Andrew about Michael, and paid homage to a lyric off one of the Shaboo tracks. I think it might be Golden Playpen or one of the tracks where that God's Top 10 lyric was there. So they're just a few of the tracks that Andrew within the band, notwithstanding his country stuff, brought to the table both a musical contribution and a lyricist there as well. And a lot of those tracks are fan favourites and do hold special places in people's hearts.
Beautiful songs.
Yeah. Now, my question to you, okay, what do you think makes him great?
Empathy. If he hadn't have had empathy, then he wouldn't have helped Michael, and then we wouldn't have had INXS in the first place.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to tell that backstory?
So Michael gets off the school bus in his school uniform, in his private school uniform from an international school in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And he looks at Michael, and then he looks at the guys looking at Michael as if to say, this guy needs to get the end of their boots. And he steps in with another big guy and protects Michael. And that's how they became friends. And then they got really into poetry together.
Yeah.
And Michael was very deep into that. And then, as we know, the Farriss brothers all learnt an instrument, and Michael was handed the microphone and he said, come on, Michael, give it a go.
Fair enough. And what about sort of musically? Is there any particular you think makes him great that just over your journey as a fan that, you connect with when you watch or listen or see, Andrew.
But yeah, I'm just thankful. Thank you, Andrew, for all the music and the lyrics and the melodies that we all, get up off our chairs and start dancing to or sing along to. How about you?
Yeah. I think I said earlier, I think he was brave. I think, as I said, because I love music and I love so many different styles of music. And I asked myself the question a few years ago, why is INXS my favourite band? And that's because I like various styles of music, lots of styles, and they encompass them all.
That's right.
As I said, there are bands out there that sonically play one note, like AC/DC would never play Never Tear Us Apart.
They get, but they get boring, don't they? Their albums.
Well, they're sort of one-trick ponies.
Yeah.
They do that trick brilliantly well.
Yeah, and INXS, you're just like, what's going to happen in this album?
Well, yeah. I mean, often when you go back and listen to some of the better albums with INXS and you look at the singles that got released, and let's break it down. You look at, say, an album like Kick, and you go, well, Need You Tonight, that's a weird song. And then Devil Inside's completely different and tonally. And then New Sensations, this upbeat banger. And then you got Never Tear Us Apart. This is this, waltz, Vienna waltz ballad. And then you've got Mystify that's got this sort of soul blues thing going. I mean, they're really
journey. Yeah.
They're all distinct styles. So if you like chicken, beef, and pork and vegetarian, that's probably why you like INXS, because they can handle all recipes. And I think, if I look back to Andrew as the songwriting genius of it all, I think it's his ability to not be encumbered or weighed down by probably, imagine how many record companies, and we all know what happened with Kick, got into the band's ear and said, you should try do this, you shouldn't do that.
Replicate this and replicate that. Yeah.
Replicate that. Like, if the band and Andrew had listened to management, or not management, listen to record companies or other advisories out there, they probably wouldn't have got to the level they got to at all.
Yeah.
And sometimes, better to die on your own sword than fall on someone else's. For Andrew, being brave, along with Michael as well, in not being sort of, as I said, weighed down by expectation. And like dance stuff in the 80s and remixes stuff in the early 80s wasn't cool. New Order come out, with, Blue Monday in 83, 84 and probably reinvented the 12-inch single, and it became cool to do that. INXS were doing 12-inch singles 3-4 years earlier than that and remixing a lot of their work. And then sort of dance stuff became really sort of quite, commonplace thereafter. And nowadays they call it electronica, with, Fatboy Slim and all these other sort of artists that have jumped on sort of the bandwagon post the Oakenfields and things. So I think for me, Andrew, what I'm thankful for, just being brave, not being encumbered by styles, looking at various opportunities to broaden, the musical palette of the band. And as a body of work, 200 plus songs later that are in the legacy for life, for our life and lives ahead, we're very, very spoiled to still have these tracks that resonate in our lives.
And so he may continue as well. You know more about this album that's coming out from Andrew?
Well, he mentioned, when he was touring last year, that probably in the first quarter of this year, which I guess is probably now, that it was looking to come out. But he might be working on it as we speak. I'm sure he's road tested some of the material. He played some of the songs live. And one of the great things artists, did in the older days, often road tested songs live and then went back and re-recorded them and fixed up things and said, oh, this bridge could work better here. And he may be working on that at the moment, no doubt. So that'll be sort of something there. Some interesting things that, over time, when I think about Andrew, that probably puzzled me a little bit. And it's not so much about him, but I always was curious as to why some record companies or other artists, particularly performers who don't write their material, didn't reach out to him more and say, I would really love you to write for me. So Robbie Williams reached out to someone like Guy Chambers. Robbie was probably more of a singer than a songwriter. And over time probably became a better lyricist and things. But Guy Chambers was the secret behind, Robbie Williams. There's another recent band that had a hit with a song. That song that in the 90s called Closing Time? Yeah. There's a great story on Facebook about this particular guy. Anyway, band, tried to have a hit, finally got one. Then, they went bankrupt and all this different stuff. And then fast forward 10 years later, he now has written most of the stuff for Adele and Billie Eilish and all these other people, right? And he's a multimillionaire now. I think for Andrew, I just think that, he's written a lot of stuff for country artists, Yotha Yindi in Australia, the Indigenous artists in the early 2000s, and Tanya Kernahan and different people. But there've probably been small-scale Aussie type of sort of performers, Jenny Morris, we know in the 80s and 90s. But it just always struck me as curious that whether he has material, in this vault of his, a whole lot of hooks and riffs and melodies. And I'm sure he's got a lot of unfinished INXS songs, some that he's using now in his solo stuff. It just surprised me that maybe, say, a 22-year-old up-and-coming great singer like I think of Whitney Houston, right? And this is a true story. Back in 1983, Clive Davis, the head of Columbia, held a meeting, dinner at a big gala event in LA, and he invited along all these great songwriters. And he got Whitney up there to sing, I don't know, Star Spangled Banner or some other song. Might have got up with Dionne Warwick, her auntie or whatever, and got up there and sung this beautiful song, right? And all of these songwriters in the audience were told, you go away and come back and write some material for Whitney. They came back with The Greatest Love of All and, How Will I Know and, Saving All Your Love. And all these tracks came back and she was the biggest star within a year. And I just think that someone like Andrew, would be a great foil for a 22-year-old up-and-coming singer, female.
Have you become his agent or something, Haydn?
No, I haven't, but maybe I should.
I think you should.
But I think, I think he would have so much, lifetime experience that.
Yeah, I do agree. I never thought about it until then.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of very famous guys, like someone like Kim Wilde, from England. Her father and her brother, particularly, but her father was quite a famous guy, but her father wrote a lot of her songs for her.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of senior statespeople in their 60s and 70s who still come up with great songs, but they give them to the younger generation who want to get out and become stars and perform. Like Andrew doesn't necessarily want to run around the world and be sort of 23 again, but he could write great pop, rock, many tunes for other artists. And I'm just wondering why other record companies haven't dialed into his.
Maybe they have, and he's signed some clause that say that he's not. You don't know.
I don't think he'd sign a clause. I think he probably may sort of, as I said, just keep stuff for himself. But I just think that he would have plenty of songs there that probably, he could co-write with other people. And maybe it's just ambition to want to do that. Maybe it's opportunity. Maybe it's a lack of people reaching out. But if you break down his catalogue of hits, and then we know our own, but remember our deep dive list of the non-hits that we put together? I mean, we're probably talking about, over 120 quality songs here. It was just a bit of an unanswered question that has always stuck with me going, well, he must have a vault full of riffs and melodies and demo tunes that could be worked on and given away.
Well, if he turns up at the party, I know what you'll be asking him.
Absolutely. Well, happy birthday, Andrew. Stay young, 66, get your kicks. Pardon the pun. Thank you for everything you've done. I know all of our listeners would probably pass on the same thing. Have the best birthday. Good luck with the album release. Hopefully we can get you on to talk about that very soon.
That'd be good.
Hey, this is Paul Jolly from Sydney, and this is The Big Rap.
All right, B. Well, that was Andrew in the can there. A lot of fun talking about something that we're passionate about as always, yeah?
Oh, so passionate about INXS. It's such a fix coming back in and talking to you.
Well, I think you happened to just mention off air to me that when we played our exit song last time, The Shine Like It Does, it did actually include Andrew, I think, singing on that. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, you asked me to find something, some footage, and I found two pieces. One with Michael, and then we played out to Kurt lead singing. John on a shaker. Okay. He wasn't actually playing the drums, and on guitar was Andrew with backing singing, and it was beautiful. It was really lovely to hear the boys, and we got some of the footage as well onto the socials. So yeah, always go onto our socials. We've always got a lot to say on there as well.
Excellent. All right. Now, party updates, B. It's literally a month to go, May 10th and / technically 11th, I believe. Is that right?
And the 11th. What's going on the 11th?
We'll wake up the next day on the 11th and make cover in the downstairs brekkie area. But
no, it will be. It will be.
Any last-minute announcements, tickets, any information?
Okay. To all those that are attending the party and also on the bus, the Strangers Party and on the bus, I will be sending out an email in the next couple of days with all the updates of where to meet, what to wear, what to bring, who will be there, and all sorts of things. There's lots going on. And yeah, so I'll be updating you with that very, very soon. Yeah, the goodie bags are looking great, aren't they?
Absolutely. Nothing like going with a goodie bag. Also, too, we have a raffle out, as we said earlier in the show, for the Listen Like Thieves reissue album, which is signed already by Kirk and Tim. Is that right, B?
It is, yeah. And then if you go along to see Andrew, then you can take your sign and get that signed by Andrew. And if you go and see Asher Moon, I would, definitely.
And if you're going to hang out at Byron Bay for a weekend, you might be able to get John to sign it. But look, raffle tickets are only $20. Got to be in it to win it. I couldn't think of a better 2025, memento than having something signed by the band on their latest.
An original, original album.
Yep. So get in, get your tickets.
Oh, sorry, I should say it's vinyl. It's not a CD.
Vinyl. Okay. So the signature's bigger then. There you go.
Yeah, it's massive.
All right. Now, B, we're going to go with a little bit of a tribute song today, and we thought we'd go with Dua Lipa doing her homage to Never Tear Us Apart. Just thought we'd do one little thing is that we have mentioned over the journey that her song Break My Heart did, as they say in legal terms, interpolate the sound of Need You Tonight onto hers. I use the word interpolate as a euphemism for saying cheated and stole the riff or Needed Tonight for Break My Heart. But to her credit, she did give the songwriting credit to Andrew and Michael, which obviously probably helped their bank accounts too, given the enormity of the sales of her album. So kudos to Dua Lipa and kudos to this version of Never Tear Us Apart live in Sydney that we will go out with today. It's a goodbye from me.
And it's a goodbye from B. Goodbye, everybody.
Was INXS Access All Areas, episode 216, the podcast that dives deep into all things great about our favourite band, INXS, helping them get into the Rock Hall of Fame, but spreading the word and love about our favourite band with my partner B, to all our patrons, listeners around the world. Hello B, how are you? Off the back, quick condolences there. I know you had a bit of a tough last week, so I know a lot of people in our community want to reach out and say, thoughts with you and the family with a sad passing. So wanted to express that to you.
Thank you, Haydn. That's very kind of you. Yes, it's been a little bit.